Record. Okay, first of all, welcome. And today we're talking about the Chinese foreign policy. Next week, we'll talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. And finally, the week after, we'll talk about the BRICS, being Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So this will be a little bit more political. I hope I will answer questions later on. First of all, I want to switch off everybody's microphone, and then if you have any questions, just unmute yourself, and then you can raise your question. Mute all, okay. Let's go back, and I will start the share screen. Share. Okay, I hope everybody can see the screen. Today we are on China's foreign policy. China's foreign policy is guided by several key principles and doctrines that have evolved over time. Now, given that China is now the modern China, or the People's Republic of China, has a history of about 74 years. So this so-called evolved in time has been informed by all the historical events that happen in the rest of the world. I will refer to that part in the later part of this presentation. Basically, officially, they summarize it into 5 principles. And another important thing is the peaceful coexistence. China is a country which have survived on the same piece of land for the last several thousand years. And on that experience, Chinese is an agricultural culture. It depends on the farming on the land to provide the existence of this civilization. So this is in contrast to the civilizations which based on moving the herds, cows or cattle, whatever, from one place to another, chasing the grass or the water. Chinese culture doesn't depend on that. Chinese culture is a localized culture which based on its existence on the provided by the environment at that location. Basically, Chinese people doesn't move around a lot. Of course, within China, there's people move around, and of course there are import, export, and trade. For example, the famous Silk Road or the Tea Road, etc. We trade, but the culture itself is very much a agricultural culture. So that is very different from the culture we commonly understand in the Western sphere. So basically, it was 5 principles. The first one is mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. As China established itself, by now, within the last 70-something years, all land borders have been settled either by agreement or diplomacy. This principle emphasizes that all nations should respect each other's sovereignty and territorial integrity. It means that no country should infringe upon the borders or sovereignty of another nation. In the context of Sino-India Agreement, it is particularly relevant to address border disputes between the two countries. Yes, we know that every now and then there are some border disputes between China and India, and that disputes is usually settled by fists instead of bullets. The soldiers in the two countries will fight each other, at most using some wooden stick and so on. They never really use lethal weapons, although people do die, I have to admit that. But it's not the same as using machine guns or rifles, etc. Okay. So yes, there are still disputes in India and China border, and that's the only one which hasn't been settled. The rest, in the north, Mongolia and Russia. In the east, in the west, in the east is basically just North Korea. In the west, we still have the Afghanistan, the Pakistan, etc. And in the south, we have the Vietnam and the countries in the southeast countries. The border are all set, no change, and the border is almost the same for the last couple of thousand years. They are the historical borders, never changed. So sovereignty. There's one remaining issue with China is the issue of Taiwan. Both the government in Taiwan, that is the Republic of China, ROC, and People's Republic of China, PRC, both these two nominal countries said there's only one China. So there's a one China policy. Both sides agree that the disagreement is who is the legal government of China. So that the government in Taiwan says, yes, we represent China because during the Second World War, they are the main force fighting the invading Japanese army. On the mainland, the government said, oh, we are now in control of the largest population, or largest percentage of Chinese population. We are the proper representation of Chinese. China has about 1.4 billion, 1.3 something billion people. Taiwan has about 20 million to 30 million people. So in terms of percentage, almost 99% of the Chinese population is ruled under the mainland government. So who represents China is the issue. That's another thing that China haven't really completed is unification. The second foreign policy is so-called non-aggression, mutual non-aggression. This principle states that nations should not use force or aggression against each other. It underscores the importance of resolving conflicts through peaceful means, such as diplomacy, negotiation, rather than resorting to military actions or war. We will talk about the peaceful rise of China in the later part of this presentation. But during the rise of the modern China in the last 40 years and so, China hasn't dropped a bomb in any country or fired a bullet as any other country. China haven't rise by using force. That is a very sharp contrast to the historical rise of almost all empire. So we will go to that a bit later on. Another one is the mutual non-interference in internal affairs. According to this principle, countries should refrain from interfering with each other's internal affairs. This means that nations should respect the right of other countries to determine their own political systems and make their own domestic decisions without external interference. This idea hinges back to two moral rules. One of the golden moral rules formulated by Jesus is that how I want to be treated, I will treat the people the same way I treat other people. So that is so-called the golden rule. It is a positive action. I treat people the way I want to be treated. But there's another moral rule promoted by Confucius. This is on a opposite direction. It is a negative rule. What I don't want to be treated, I don't treat other people the same way I don't want to be treated. So when you space, both of these moral rules is based on a moral measure, which is yourself. I use my the people should use itself as a measuring stick, and then compare the actions to the experience of oneself. If I feel that it's good, then I will do that the same thing to other people. If the ad make me happy, then if I do the same thing to other people, that will make other people happy. If I do something to the other people, the people will feel hurt. And if that's something due to me, I also feel hurt. So using oneself as a measuring stick is a common moral standard. The difference is about action and inaction. The Chinese believe in inaction. That means whatever you do, if it doesn't influence me, it is up to you. We don't want to put what I like to force you to like the same thing I like. Some people might like eating very hot food. I mean, spicy hot. Other people might not. If I like spicy hot, I shouldn't force other people to like spicy hot food. So that is a negative. In terms of positive, they will say, oh, I like very hot, spicy hot food. I will recommend you to have very spicy hot food. If you don't like it, it is your problem. That is the golden moral rule. But in this Confucius version, he said, okay, I like it, but you may not like it. That's fine. You choose your action you like. In other words, in terms of political system, the Chinese do not believe in one universal political system. Different culture, different countries with its different backgrounds should be able to determine their own political systems and not forced to use one political system. Now, that is a major difference from the current idea of promoting freedom and a democracy. China doesn't promote anything. We have our own political system. You have your own political system. I'm not going to interfere you, and you are not going to interfere mine as well. That is the third principle in terms of foreign policy. And of course, in terms of hardship, for example, the recent conflict between the Palestine and Israel, the Chinese stand is that both sides should keep the violence to minimum, restrain from hurting the innocent citizens, and sit down and resolve your problem. China is not going to support any side with arms or stand on any one side. Just like the issue with Ukraine and Russia, China doesn't support any supply any military equipment to anyone on one side. China has always been promoting mutual political solution. The 4th point is equality and mutual benefit. This principle highlights the importance of treating all nations, regardless of their size or power, as equals in international relations. It calls for cooperation based on mutual benefit, where nations work together or for their common interests, rather than seeking to exploit or dominate one another. China, for the last at least 2,000 to 3,000 years, has been the dominant political power in the region. Nearby countries like Korea, Vietnam, or even Japan, or other Southeast countries, compared with China, is very, very small. Not only in terms of population, but also in terms of economic strength, in terms of military power. The only exception is maybe the last 200 to 300 years, where China is very strong commercially, but very weak in terms of military ability. Except that last 2,000 to 3,000 years, China has always been the largest, strongest, most influential country in at least Southeast Asia or Eastern Asia, the whole Asia. With that, that means if China want to conquer all these other countries, it can. No problem about that. But China didn't and will not. The reason is China understand if you want to join us by assimilation, that is fine. But if you want to conquer a place and then you keep on ruling that place, it is a huge cost. It is a huge responsibility. Based on non-interference, as long as we can have a friendly relationship, or usually is a vassal relationship, people say, okay, China, you are the big brother here. We will submit to you. And this is our gift to you. Then the Chinese emperor said, hey, good, thank you. And this is my return gift to you. So based on exchanging gifts, we have a good relationship. The same thing happens today. Yes, at the moment, it seems that the dominant power is still the Western power. But I believe in the next 20 to 30 years, that power shift will occur and China will again go back to one of the most important power in the world. How China will treat other countries? Well, these 5 foreign policy doctrines explain it. So China will treat other countries, even they are smaller in size, in power, in economic sense, etc. They are treated as equal. The most important principle is the last one, peaceful coexistence. The 5th principle emphasizes the peaceful coexistence of nations. It means that the countries should strive to live in peace and harmony with each other, avoiding conflicts and confrontations. Peaceful coexistence promotes cooperation, diplomacy, and dialogue as means of resolving disputes and maintaining stability. Chinese people like stability. Chinese people work hard, skillful in trade, and equally intelligent as any other civilization. As long as there's a peaceful environment, Chinese people will survive, will have better days than yesterday in the future. So we emphasize peaceful coexistence. We want to avoid conflict. We want to avoid war. We know that war is always hurtful, meaning that people harming people, hurting people, etc. We want to live our life happy. So let's look at some history of this development. The 5 principles of peace coexistence is originally in 1950s and formulated as a result of the negotiation between India and China. In the 50s, soon after the formation of People's Republic of China, there were skirmishes between the borders at the India and China border, in order to negotiate a peace. These 5 principles is proposed. This is a quick background of this historical event. In the aftermath of the World War II, during the early days of the Cold War, many new independent Asian and African countries were seeking ways to assert their sovereignty and pursue a non-alliance foreign policy, including India. India, led by then Prime Minister, and China by the Premier Zhou Enlai, shared a common desire to promote peace and cooperation among newly independent nations. The principle was first formulated in the Sino-Indian Agreement on Trade and Intercourse between Tibet region of China and India, signed on April 29, 1954. This agreement aimed to regulate trade and cultural exchanges between the two countries, particularly in context of the Tibetan region, which was a point of contention. The 5 principles of peaceful coexistence were not limited to Sino-India relationships, but were seen as a framework for peaceful international relations. China promoted these principles as a guide for interactions between nations, particularly among newly independent countries in Asia and Africa. Over the years, this principle has been applied in various international contexts, such as in China's relations with other countries and in resolutions and statements in the United Nations. They also have been referenced in diplomatic engagements and agreements between China and other nations. What is not aligning with this doctrine? Of course, the first one is the South China Sea dispute. If we look back in the history, we never heard about South China Sea before 2010. Suddenly, South China Sea becomes an issue in about 2011. China has always had a territorial claims in the South China Sea, mainly because in our Ming Dynasty, there's 14 something, okay, 14, the whole, during the Ming Dynasty, from mid-Ming to about late Ming Dynasty, there's a general Jiang Ke. Jiang Ke took about 1,000 ships, sailed down the South China Sea, pass through the Malacca Strait, and go to as far as the east border of Africa. There's altogether 7 voyages. In each voyage, Jiang Ke bring back different gifts from different kingdoms along the way. And South China Sea islands becomes a very important resupply points, especially in terms of fresh water and so forth. So if we refer to the administration of these South China Sea islands, historically, at least from 1400s or the 15th century, China has a de facto control of these South China Sea islands. But it has been a subject of international controversy. Then, United States started their so-called freedom of navigation, sending warships into this region. Imagine somebody brings along an armed big gang of people walking in front of your house and knocking on your door. They are heavily armed. They say they come here to make sure that the place is safe. But historically, there's no crime in your region. And these people, without invitation, fully armed, walk in front of your door. What do you do? This doesn't happen before 2010. So the Chinese government started thinking, what's happening? What happened that suddenly South China Sea has all these disputes happening every now and then, everybody claiming this part and that part. Yes, historically, some of these islands are very close to Philippines, and some very close to Malaysia, and some very close to Vietnam. But historically, these countries do not have the naval ability or the sailing ability to actually have full control of these islands. Today, that's all changed. People do have armed ships and so forth. So I will come back to this issue next week when we talk about the importance of the Belt and Road Initiative. So I would put it that way. There is a sudden happening of South China Sea disputes. And so far, China has been trying to resolve the issue through, again, negotiations and diplomacy. So China engaged in bilateral negotiations with individual Cayman states. For instance, it held talks with Vietnam, with Philippines, with Malaysia, etc., etc. And the Association of Southeast Asian nations established a code of conduct in the South China Sea. This code of conduct is intended to provide framework for managing disputes, reducing tensions, and promoting confidence-building measures among parties in the region. So this code of conduct is a negotiation between China. Yes, we know it is a huge country with huge influence. But on the other hand, The other negotiating party is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The whole group of nations together with China negotiated a framework called Code of Conduct. And this Code of Conduct is used in bilateral negotiations. So when we talk about the bilateral negotiations, it is not a big brother bullying a small country like Vietnam or Philippines. Rather, the big brother negotiations with all the little brothers together as a unit to come up with a framework and then apply that framework equally to everybody. Every now and then, this framework has to be re-emphasized. So it's almost every Asian meeting, this framework will be on the agenda and will be affirmed once again. This is one of the photo I found on the web, date to 2017. But it's the same every year. Every year, the senior officials of the Asian countries will stress that we are still sticking to this code of conduct. So this is the 14th of this code of conduct. 2017 minus 14. That means this code of conduct was established in 2003. Remember I talked about these disputes in South China Sea started in about 2010. That means much earlier than the so-called disputes, China and the Asian countries has already established a framework to solve the issue in South China Sea. Here's another example. This one is 2023 in July 13. The Asian country, China, agreed on the guidelines to accelerate the South China Sea Code of Conduct negotiations. Again, remind it again. So this happens every year during Asian meeting. People want to move forward. Somehow, there are different hurdles, always new hurdles coming up, never resolve the issue. Another important principle is this One China principle. The One China principle is a fundamental policy and diplomatic stance held by the People's Republic of China, PRC, which asserts that there is only one legitimate government of China, and that government is based in Beijing. This is the Chinese side. According to this principle, Taiwan is considered an integral part of China, and the PRC views Taiwan as a province that must eventually reunite with the mainland under the control of the central government in Beijing. So when establishing diplomatic relations with any country, the One China policy is always included. Because that is a fundamental policy, and China will unify with Taiwan, hopefully by peace, but if necessary, by force. Not only China put that as one of the most important things, it is also recognized in United Nations. The United Nations recognized the People's Republic of China as the legitimate government of China. This recognition is based on UN General Assembly Resolution 2758, which was adopted on October 25th, 1971. This resolution expelled the representative of PRC, ROC, the Republic of China, which governs Taiwan, and recognized PRC as the only legitimate representative of China to the United Nations. As a result of this resolution, Taiwan lost its seats at the UN. And also China becomes the permanent member of the Security Council of UN at the same time. When establishing the diplomatic relationship between PRC and United States, then one of the series of important agreements and declarations also are the joint communique on the establishment of political relations issued on 1st of January 1979. This communique is also known as the Joint China-U.S. Communique, marked the historical turning point in Sino-U.S. relations. The main points in that communique is, first of all, the United States officially recognized the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legitimate government of China. That means that U.S. no longer recognize the Republic of China on Taiwan as the government of China. So the government in Taiwan is no longer a national government. It is a local government. It is a government of a province. Treating the Taiwan government as a country or a nation is against this joint communique on the establishment of diplomatic relations. And the United States agreed to terminate its political relations, the diplomatic relations with the ROC. This include the closure of U.S. embassy in Taipei. So the United States have an office of trade in Taiwan. It is not a full embassy. It is only an office to facilitate trade. The communique acknowledged that both sides expressed the expectation that the Taiwan question would be peacefully resolved by the Chinese people themselves without specifying the nature of that resolution. Taiwan will reunify with China. And that is a domestic issue. It is not an international issue, because the one China policy, and because at least to Americans, it is in the fundamental agreement as the establishment of diplomatic relations. Both countries agreed to establish formal diplomatic relations and to exchange ambassadors. This marked the end of decades of non-recognition and limited engagement between the United States and PRC. The communique affirmed the principles of mutual respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, and mutual non-interference in each other's internal affairs, which are consistent with international diplomatic norms. Both countries expressed their intent to promote economic, cultural, and other forms of exchange and cooperation between the two nations. The last part is very typical in any diplomatic relationship. Non-alignment. China often follows the policy of not aligning itself with any major power. It seeks to establish flexibility in its foreign relations, avoiding taking sides in international disputes and conflicts. China has no military treaty with any other country, zero. Unlike, for example, NATO or other military agreement, China do not enter into any military agreement with any country. This is really non-alliance. Peaceful rise. Can China actually rise peacefully? Or put it in another way, will the rest of the world allow China to rise peacefully? This doctrine, advocated by former Chinese leader Wu Jintao, emphasized China's commitment to peaceful economic development and cooperation with other nations. It aims to assure the international community that China's rise will not pose a threat to global stability. Unfortunately, it poses a threat to a certain country's dominance in the world. Here, I want to quote you a number of examples of the rise of empire. The rise of empires throughout history has been associated with wars and military conflicts. Empires has established, expanded, and maintained through a combination of conquest, diplomacy, and sometimes coercion. So we know that China has risen, and we also know that China hasn't used any war or conflict in its rise. But let's look at some of the examples in the past. Roman Empire. The Roman Republic transitioned into the Roman Empire through a series of civil wars, including the Roman Republic's defeat of Carthage in the Punic Wars and in the internal struggles that led to the rise of figures like Julius Caesar and Augustus. The conquest of various territories, such as the Gaul, also played a significant role in expanding the Roman Empire. Basically, the Roman Empire expanded by continuous conquest of weaker areas. The Mongol Empire, Genghis Khan, the Mongol Empire rapidly expanded through a series of military campaigns in the 13th century. The Mongol conquered vast territories in Asia, Europe, Middle East, established one of the largest empires in history. Ottoman Empire rose to power in late Middle Ages through a combination of military conquest and effective governance. They conquered Constantinople in 1453 and expanded their territory into Europe, Asia, Africa, making it a formidable empire that lasts for centuries. British Empire, we all know about how British Empire ensure its dominance. But in particular, we have the 7 Years' War and the Opium Wars, which enable the empire the wealth it is needed to colonize the rest of the world. Spanish Empire, again, it is closely tied to the exploration and conquest in the Americas. The Spanish crown sponsored voyages led by explorers such as Cristobal Columbus, etc., which resulted in the conquest of vast territories in the New World. These examples illustrate that the rise of empires often involve military conflicts and wars, whether for territory expansions, consolidation of power, or subjugation of other nations. However, it is essential to note that empire building is not solely a product of warfare, but also involves cultural, economic, and political factors. Additionally, the consequences of these wars and the impact on the conquered people and the regions were complex and varied, usually lead to genocide or complete destruction of its civilization. People may not know, before the Western countries reach the Africa, we have powerful empires in Africa. Ancient examples will be Egypt. We all know about the Egyptian power before the Roman time, its pyramids, etc. But even more south, there are various cultural and kingdoms in Africa. But today we consider Africa almost like a land of no civilization. That is the result of colonization. So we will look at the impact of colonization before I will open up for people asking questions. The first thing is, of course, the exploitation of resources. Colonizing powers often extracted vast amounts of natural resources, such as minerals, timbers, agricultural products from their colonies. These resources are typically shipped back to the colonial power, leaving the colony with depleted resources and few opportunities for economic diversification or development. Economic dependence. Many colonized nations are integrated into the global economy in ways that left them economically dependent on the colonizer. This dependence often led to a lack of economic self-sufficiency and resilience. Disruption of indigenous economies. Colonial powers often disrupted and sometimes destroyed existing indigenous economic systems. Traditional industries and agriculture were frequently supplanted by cash crop cultivation or economic activities favored by the colonizers. Just remember, when the West reached America, what they grow, instead of growing grains or other high-value crops, they grow sugar cane, because at that time, sugar is considered a very valuable goods. It just neglects the need of the indigenous population. Everybody is pushed to grow sugar cane, and the indigenous population suffered almost genocide. Infrastructure development. While colonial powers built some infrastructure in their colonies, this was often done to facilitate resource extraction rather than to promote overall economic development. As a result, infrastructure in many post-colonial nations remain inadequate for modern economic needs. We just need to look at Africa as well as India. We know what that means. Education and healthcare. Access to education and healthcare system often unequal during colonial rule, with colonizers typically reserving better services for their own population. This lead to disparities in human capital development, which also has lasting effects on economic productivity. Colonization often leads to cultural disruption and the imposition of foreign values and institutions. This would result in social divisions and conflicts that hinder economic development. I will add one more thing is that one of the best way to rule some place which is not yours is a divide and conquer. Create different groups of people, even when they were neighbors, but you pick up some differences. For example, different religion or different ethnic group, and use that to promote hate between the two groups, which were friendly for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and maximize this conflict in order to divide, and then you can rule that area. Think about what I have just said apply to the modern Israel. Colonial power frequently drew borders without regard for local ethnic or cultural divisions. These arbitrary borders have often contributed to conflicts and political instability, which can undermine economic development. Some post-colonial nations inherited significant debts from their colonial masters. Repaying these debts would divert resources away from domestic development. Think about the Western African countries, which were a French colony. Political system. Colonization often introduced political systems that were not necessarily conducive to good governance or economic development. Many post-colonial countries struggle with political instability and corruption. So this final slide, this is something that the rise of China is and its foreign policy is based on a community of a shared future for mankind. A community of shared future for mankind is an idea promoted by the current President Xi Jinping. And given the examples I've given about the rise of empires, it is really I would say miracle. Improper example, unlikely example is a whatever, that China can rise in peace. Okay, I will stop here, stop share, and then I will invite questions. Anyone would like to raise any questions? Please unmute yourself. No? Anyone? Yes, please unmute yourself.
Albert, how do you think China might fare with the current position with the US and Israel?
Difficult questions. Very, very difficult. I'm not what is happening is still happening. So it will take a while for things to settle down, and then we will have a better position. What happened recently has a historical background dating back at least 100 years. The Jews, the last time the Jews was a country, we'll have to date back before the Roman Empire. Right back before the Roman Empire. That will be over 2,000 years ago. And then in the last 2,000 years, the Jews was never a country. And the Jews and the Palestinians lived side by side in that piece of land for hundreds of years. Then a sudden establishment of a Israel state, and then forcing the local population into open prison in Gaza and the West Bank, etc., is not conducive to peaceful resolution. We are talking about two ethnic groups, the Jews as well as the Palestinians. I don't want to see the Palestine extinct, nor see the Jews extinct. Both of them have the right to existence. Both of them have the right to have their own nation. So the only solution is the two countries solutions. There's no other solution. And all the bloodshed, put it this way, is to call upon the world's conscience and to look at the problem. This is the timing is also interesting. At the moment, last year we have the Russia-Ukraine conflict. We know that the Ukraine has been exhausting not the Russia's military equipment, but NATO's and US military supplies. So on one hand, the military ability of the West, including the US, is almost the weakest at least in the last 100 years, because of the weaponry has been almost exhausted. We also just come through our country's biggest pandemic, the COVID, killing millions of people. And we are still suffering from the consequence of the COVID, at least economically. Many countries are still fighting inflation. The world economy is almost at a halt, almost stopping. Economic-wise, the world is not at the best of time, if not the worst of time. And then with the normalization of political relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, means in the Middle East, the Arabs, which also include the Palestinians, had never been more united in the last 100 years, at least. So the Palestine, I shouldn't say Palestine, I would say Hamas, okay. A military group within the Palestine population, just a group of people, the Hamas, take this opportunity and then try to arouse the world's conscious about the suffering of the Palestinian people at this point in time. What I'm so sorry to see is that the world isn't showing its compassion. I know Israel suffered loss, but in comparison, when an Air Force sent bombs to to unarmed civilians, that's war crime.
I heard that Israel, just in the last week, when you think about it, is horrifying. They, as I understand the reports, they lodged 6,000 missiles into Gaza in 1 week.
Yes.
6,000. I mean, that's just, the mind boggles as to how anyone's still alive.
And also they shut down all the electricity, water, food, medical supplies. That is genocide. And the Geneva Convention explicitly stated that this kind of action hurting a whole community is war crime. I haven't heard any people say something compassionate to the Palestine. I know Palestine shouldn't start this, but what else then can they do? They are so
it's certainly going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better.
Yes. So the only hope we see is quickly stop the violence, go back to negotiation tables, and find a solution.
Not going to happen. Not going to happen. The Jewish people are out for revenge now.
Revenge never solve problems.
Yeah, no.
Revenge only need to more revenge.
Yeah.
Very unfortunate. Yes,
fighting on. Sorry. Yeah. Fighting on foot in Gaza won't be a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
But that's what they plan. Yeah. Would China have any influence in this? I mean, they've got a relationship with Iran.
Well, China keep very good relationship with both Palestine and Israel and Iran and Saudi Arabia. Well, China is the main traders with all of them. So China do have a bit of influence, but given the foreign policy, China is not going to involve in this domestic conflict. What the best China can do is, come on, guys, sit down, be a man, not fight each other. Sit down, talk. That's what is promoted by Chinese foreign policy department. Say, you guys should sit down and talk. Of course, stop asking them.
I don't think sitting down and talk is going to solve the settlement problem.
No, it is a very difficult problem. It is a very difficult problem.
And the United Nations have ruled many times, including with China, that it is illegal. But America supports it.
Yeah,
we support it. What can be done?
More budget, and then hopefully some real politicians, real politicians have the guts and willpower to stop the bloodshed. I hope that person come from Israel. Somebody in Israel with a proper moral compass will get into power and say, that's enough. We will stop it for good.
But given their far-right government at the moment, the ideology, I mean, there's no one in sight that even resembles a peace-broking person.
No.
I mean,
Yeah, it's
just awful. I mean, look what was happening before Gaza, before Hamas struck. I mean, with the Jewish, so with the Israel's looking to override their Supreme Court. I mean, the demonstrations that have been going on for months, literally. I mean, the place is a mess. But on an encouraging note, I mean, in Australia, when our relationship with China seems to be a little on the, well, not a little, but well on the improve, don't you think?
Well, I think it's going back again. The relationship with China improves when we change government. But it is now going back again. Scott Morrison abolished our purchase of submarines from French, and then start these AUKUS and buying some hopes in the sky. Come on, I don't think America is going to allow Australians to have nuclear submarine capability. No way. I don't think Americans will let us have that capability. And our stupid politicians believe that we can have nuclear submarine. Come on, where's their brains? Will any country allow another country with nuclear submarines? No way.
I would disagree with you there, because I think they will let Australia have nuclear submarines. The only problem is they'll be run by the Americans.
Exactly. That means we lost the control of our own military. What kind of politicians think like that? They are not thinking for us. If they think for us, they understand we cannot have our military in the hands of anybody except ourselves. Not to say that I want to fight anybody, but at least as an Australian, we should control our military. Full stop. I don't see any reason our defense submarines should hand to somebody else other than Australian armed forces. But we have Scott Morrison, okay? And then followed by equally stupid PM. If I were PM, I will revert that and say, no, we are not pursuing nuclear submarine. We don't need nuclear submarine, first of all. And the Americans is not going to let us have this capability anyway.
Do you think we need submarines at all?
No. I don't think so. Yes, we need armed forces to make sure we are safe. But historically, except by colonization, Australia never invaded. Were never, except by the Japanese for a very fraction of time. Otherwise, we are in a remote area far away from the political centers. We just need to be able to manage ourselves and make no enemy with anybody else, then we will be safe. And that's one of the reasons why I moved to Australia. It's safe. We have energy, we have land, we have food. We have a small population. This small population will survive on our land no matter what. Unless it's a nuclear happening somewhere in the world, then we may die. Otherwise, we are safe. We are 100% safe. I have no problem saying I'm safe here in Australia. I can't say that in Hong Kong or in China, but I can say that in Australia here, in Melbourne. And remember, Melbourne is one of the best cities to live.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. No matter what you say, this is the paradise. Why make the paradise into a potential target? I don't really understand our politicians. If we are arming ourselves with nuclear weapons, then the second strike, not necessarily the first strike, but the second strike, we will be targeted. If somebody do a first strike on China, then the only response China will do is not a second strike to the launch of the first strike, but to any power which have nuclear weapons, which might align with that first striker. Sorry, very sad.
Okay.
Okay, next week will be much better. Will not be that sad. Okay, we will talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, which is again a very important foreign policy of modern China. Okay, if there's anybody else have any question? Okay, if there's no more questions, then thank you so much for your attention, and then we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Albert.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Really good.